The fictional content we watch and read can touch our lives in many ways and draw us in. Sometimes a completely fictional story has such an impact on us that it gives birth to another story within our own lives. What I'm about to tell you isn't from a movie or anime, it is a story from real life. And the reason this story happened is a manga. This Japanese comic book not only changed a kid's life, but also the life of its creator in a completely different way. The work that created this impact is Bleach. Before telling the story, it would be better to talk a little about Bleach's author, Tite Kubo, and mention the difficulties he faced to understand his character. Tite Kubo is a mangaka with some problems. He was only able to continue his previous series, a manga called Zombie Powder, up to the 27th chapter. For those who don't read manga, 27 chapters may not sound like that few. But considering that each chapter in manga takes 20 to 30 pages to tell a story, it turns out to be a short series that can be read and finished in an hour. Before deciding to make this video, I thought the Zombie Powder series ended because it didn't catch on, because it was boring, or because it was unsuccessful. Then when I started doing some research on Kubo, I learned that he had experienced severe emotional trauma in his career before he became a regular artist for the Bleach manga. The Zombie Powder manga really didn't catch on, and was cancelled in its 7th month of publication. But in those years, Tite Kubo had no experience with a regular weekly drawing schedule. He was seeing for the first time in his life what it was like to draw manga weekly, and he couldn't get used to the pace. On top of that, he's overly focused on his editor's comments, naturally losing his creative freedom and struggling with his morale. Long before I did any research for this video, I remember thinking when I first watched Bleach, what kind of person wrote this? He must have been depressed or something to come up with these parts. The main reason I thought this was because Bleach's world had a design that was too dark for the battle shonen theme. Because Bleach takes place in a universe where there is life after death, a universe with concepts like heaven, hell, and the afterlife. Yet in our view, the heaven of this universe is complicated. In the realm we can see called Soul Society, there is no eternal life, no peaceful, happy future with justice. This is a realm where the strong can oppress the weak, where people who lack sufficient reiatsu or spiritual power languish in poor villages, struggling to survive and may even die. In other words, this work depicts a pessimistic universe where, even if you live a good life and go to the Soul Society, you could still face immense hardship, and perhaps even become a villain yourself. However, by keeping this gloominess in the background and successfully bringing the characters and their fights to the forefront, it becomes a manga that is also very popular with young readers. One of those young readers is the sick child I will mention shortly. A mangaka, or manga artist, has the task of drawing and preparing the pages that must be completed within the time allotted to them. Since Bleach is published in a weekly magazine, Kubo must present a story that will keep the reader interested throughout that chapter, and make them curious about the next chapter for 20 pages every week. However, it cannot be said that he is very successful in doing so. Sometimes he catches a cold and doesn't draw new chapters for the week he's sick. Drawing 20 pages may not seem that difficult at first. After all, as readers, we consume a chapter of manga in a matter of minutes. However, the effort and sacrifice the artist makes to show their work and story to people is enormous. For example, Kubo learned after drawing the finale of Bleach that the tendons in his shoulder were torn. There was even a rumor that the reason for this was his habit of leaning on his left arm while drawing. To sum up, drawing 20 pages in a week requires drawing for long hours every day. Some mangaka can only allow themselves 3 hours of free time per week. There are many mangaka who suffer injuries like Kubo. Katsura Hoshino, the mangaka of the D. Gray Man series, suffered such distress in his hands and now only releases new chapters every 3 months. Or Yoshihiro Togashi, the mangaka of the Hunter x Hunter series, who took long breaks due to back problems and drew many new chapter drafts when he recovered. Many mangaka pay the price with their health to convey their stories the way they want. When Kubo-sensei takes breaks from Bleach, his excuse is usually a cold. To fans at the time, taking breaks for such a simple illness sounded like he was making excuses to take breaks because of other problems he was facing in his life. At some point, some fans who were following the series closely began to lose the excitement they felt while waiting for new episodes. There is also a significant portion of fans who were disappointed by the ending. There was even someone who hated the ending so much that they burned their entire Bleach collection. As you can see, Tite Kubo is a mangaka who sometimes takes breaks from his series due to health issues and, largely due to his worsening health problems, was forced to end his story earlier than planned. While there is no clear information about his state of mind, some people think he experienced a slight depression due to both having to take constant breaks and ending Bleach a few years earlier than planned. I think you understand the message I'm trying to convey with all this. Tite Kubo has always faced difficulties throughout his manga writing career. The emotional trauma he experienced because he couldn't adapt to the lifestyle of his manga before Bleach, the possibility of Bleach being rejected at the beginning of its publication, having to take breaks from drawing due to health issues, and finally having to end it much earlier than he had planned. Yet somehow, he continues to draw, and continues his story, for better or worse, until 2016, finishing it with the finale he desired. So how is it that this man is able to finish his work, rather than leaving it half-finished and putting his series on hold for years like some other mangaka? We learned this from a series of tweets he posted 3 months after the manga's finale. Here, Tite Kubo recounts an event he experienced, accompanied by his own drawings. I will tell this event for you, accompanied by these drawings. In the 10th year of Bleach, Tite Kubo's health began to seriously deteriorate. At first, these were just simple colds, and he could get over them quickly. But his body was no longer working that fast. A simple cold could keep Kubo bedridden for a long time. He would spend 1 week producing a new chapter, and the next week completely recovering. So the time he could have spent resting was pointless. Whenever he felt better, he would somehow fall ill again, trapped in an endless cycle. As I mentioned earlier, a mangaka's job is to deliver drawings of a certain quality on a certain number of pages within a certain time frame. However, Kubo was unable to fulfill this task and felt more and more unsuccessful as a mangaka with each passing day. He thought he couldn't go on anymore. He was losing hope completely. He spent his days thinking about how to finish Bleach, how to bring it to a satisfying conclusion as quickly as possible. He couldn't even imagine tying Bleach to the finale he wanted with a good storyline. If he couldn't do what he needed to do properly, quitting was the most logical option in his view. In the midst of this despair, he turned to fan letters, hoping they might help him pull himself together a little, and picked up a letter with no name or address on it. The sender was a young boy spending his days in the hospital, whose medications had stopped responding to his treatment. The child had reached a point where he could no longer enjoy anything. Watching TV or playing video games, things that normally brought him joy, no longer did so, because they reminded him of his friends and the time he spent with them. Naturally, the boy became even more saddened by his loneliness, constantly finding himself longing for the past. When he learned that his illness was incurable, the boy's wish was to die immediately. However, he still had 18 months of his life ahead of him, and those around him wanted the boy to live the rest of the time. His family desperately wanted him to enjoy life in some way during his final days, and brought him many things for that purpose. Since video games no longer captured his attention, those around him found a solution to get a few manga. Although the child had never been particularly into manga before, he gave these series a chance and glanced through them. And after reading many of them, he discovered Bleach. For the first time in a long while, this child truly wanted something: to read the next volume of Bleach. Ever since he was taken to the hospital, this was the first thing that came to the child's mind about tomorrow. This manga had made the child forget his loneliness. The characters in Bleach felt like friends to him. A manga had changed this child's world and given him a life. In his letter, the child did not include his name or address, fearing that Kubo would feel sorry for him and finish Bleach earlier than normal so he could see the end of the story before he died. Although he wanted to explain his situation and send his wish to the author of the series he admired, he did not want the series he read with such excitement to end in a way the author would not want. Therefore, the child made a condition to those around him. "Send the letter after I die," he told them. When Kubo read this sentence, he realized that the fan who sent the letter had already passed away. The letter ended with these words: "Kubo-sensei, I have one last request. Please draw Bleach the way you want it to end. That's what I want to read." I don't know how Kubo reacts when he finishes reading the letter, or how long he keeps staring at it. But what I do know is that this child has brought Kubo back to himself. He gathers himself, thinking of this child's wish as a kind of will, and continues drawing to bring Bleach to the end he had planned in his mind from the very beginning. Just as Bleach held an important place in the child's life, this child's letter holds an important place in Kubo's life. Since he sent the letter after his death, Kubo never got to meet this special fan. Still, he must have wanted to thank this kid from the bottom of his heart. So he drew a short manga explaining these events you see on screen and shared it with everyone on Twitter, asking his online fans for one thing: please help me learn more about this child. After all, Kubo didn't know the child's name or where they had lived in the past. Fans wanted to respond to this request. Some retweeted the story, while others tried to find out more about the child or get the story to the child's family in other ways. And they finally reached someone, the person who sent the letter. At first, everyone thought someone from the child's family had sent the letter, but it turned out the sender was actually one of the child's friends. Kubo contacted the sender and then shared this drawing, which you see on the screen, on his Twitter account for the fans who helped him. On the screen you see a panel of Ichigo, thanking everyone for their help. Although we mostly consume fictional content just for the sake of consumption, stories can sometimes be more than just a story for us. Sometimes they inspire us. Sometimes they teach us painful lessons. Some make us question ourselves. Some help us realize we are on the right path. Some destroy us. Some bring us back to ourselves. Some characters make us feel as if they were real friends. And some become life for a child.